Ever find yourself stressing over finding, like, the perfect gift? You know what I mean? It's like you really want to get it right.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think we've all been there.
Well, it turns out we're not alone.
Yeah.
This whole idea of gift giving, it's got this long and kind of surprisingly anxious history, full of power plays, social anxieties, and even some pretty big fails.
It's true. Gift giving has always been a lot more than just the actual object itself. I mean, you can really learn a lot about different cultures and time periods just by looking at the kinds of gifts people exchanged.
And that is exactly what we're going to be diving into today, the complex and often surprising world of gift giving. Specifically, we're going to be exploring The Gift of Giving, a special exhibition at the Bodleian Library in Oxford.
Oh, very cool.
And to help us unpack all of this, we've got insights from the exhibition's curator, Dr. Nicholas Perkins, and historian Dr. Felicity Heel. They've literally written the book on this topic.
That's awesome. I'm excited to hear what they have to say.
Me too.
Yeah.
So let's get started. What are some of the big themes or questions that this exhibition is trying to explore?
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me was how much this exhibition makes you think about the motivation behind giving. Like, is it really about just being generous? Or is it more about social obligation? Or even like a subtle power move?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Right? Like every gift, even something small, could have these big implications, especially in a setting like the Tudor court.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Like, what kind of gifts are we talking about here?
Well, the exhibition features all sorts of amazing things, like these lavishly embroidered books. Some of them even tell stories about disastrous gifts, kind of like the Trojan horse.
Right.
But it also shows how something as simple as storytelling can be this powerful form of gift exchange.
I like that. So let's jump into some specifics then. Where should we start?
Well, how about we transport ourselves back to early modern Britain?
Okay, I'm game.
So back then, any kind of gift, whether it was a book, some food hospitality advice, all of it carried a lot of weight.
So it was like every present was a carefully calculated move in this game of social chess.
Exactly. And in that context, even small gifts could have major implications, especially in a place like the Tudor court.
Speaking of the Tudor court, there's a piece in the exhibition created by a young Princess Elizabeth. You know, the future Queen Elizabeth I.
Yeah, it's this incredible embroidered piece she made as a New Year's gift for her stepmother, Catherine Parr.
Wow. And what's the story behind this gift?
Well, it's not just some pretty picture, it's a translation of The Mirror of Sinful Souls. And this text was super controversial at the time, all wrapped up in these religious debates.
So even a 10-year-old's needlework was a power move.
I
I mean, what was she trying to say with this gift?
It was probably a way for her to show that she supported the religious reforms that were happening at the time. Maybe a subtle message to her stepmother and the court.
That is fascinating. It's like kids using gifts to make a statement,
Yeah.
even way back then.
Totally. And it makes you wonder, right? What kind of messages are we sending with our gifts today?
That's a good question to think about. But this whole idea of being anxious about gift giving, it's not just a Tudor thing, right? It seems like it pops up throughout history.
Oh, absolutely. Like in Chaucer's Piers Plowman, there's this character, Lady Mead, and she represents the corrupting power of gifts and bribes.
Wow.
And then centuries later, you have the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who actually saw gift-giving as a potential burden and something that could destabilize society.
Wow, that's interesting. So I have to ask, what about religion? How did giving factor into people's relationship with God?
Great question. Before the Reformation, giving material gifts to God was a huge part of religious practice.
Interesting.
And one of the most amazing examples in the exhibition is this 15th century Abingdon Missal. It's incredibly ornate, and it shows how people believed that fancy gifts could bring them closer to God.
That's fascinating. But was it always about these super extravagant gifts?
Not necessarily. The exhibition also features some simpler but equally impressive gifts given for religious reasons. For example, there's this gorgeous calligraphic translation of the Psalms by Esther English, who was hoping to gain Queen Elizabeth's favor.
So she was basically using her talent as a gift to try and move up in society.
Precisely. It shows how gift giving could serve so many different purposes at the same time: devotion, artistry, social ambition.
It sounds like this exhibition has something for everyone. From royal power plays to these deeply personal expressions of faith.
Exactly. Gift giving really is this universal language that transcends time and place.
It really is.
Yeah,
And I think it's a great place to take a quick break.
sounds good.
When we come back, we'll dive into even more fascinating examples from the exhibition. So stay tuned.
We'll be right back. One of the things that really struck me about this exhibition is how it makes you rethink what a gift actually is. It's not always about, material
Oh,
things.
really?
Yeah.
So what else did they consider to be gifts?
Well, they have this whole section on the tradition of giving books as New Year's gifts in early modern England.
Books as gifts. That's not something you see very often these days.
I know, right? But back then, books were super valuable, not just for what they said, but also as symbols of knowledge and status. Giving someone a book was a way to show off your intellect and, your connection to all these big ideas.
So it was like giving a part of your mind, literally.
Exactly. And the exhibition has some truly remarkable books that were given as gifts, like one that belonged to Queen Elizabeth I herself. It's a 16th century book of hours. But here's the thing, it's missing a page.
Oh, wow. What happened to it? Was it damaged or something?
It's actually even more interesting than that. The missing page had a painting on it, and someone carefully cut it out of the book centuries ago. But get this, the Bodleian Library recently got a hold of this missing piece, and they've reunited it with the original book just for this exhibition.
That's incredible. So what does this painting show?
It's a depiction of the adoration of the Magi, the three kings bringing gifts to baby Jesus. But the artist did something really cool. They kind of wove in these ideas about diversity and cultural exchange. The three kings represent different ages and continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, all coming together to honor the newborn king.
That's a really powerful message, especially for that time period.
Totally. And speaking of stories, the exhibition also has a copy of this medieval romance, the story of the Earl of Toul.
Ooh, a medieval romance. Tell me more.
It's a bit more worn than some of the other exhibits, but it has this beautiful drawing on the first page that shows a man giving a book to a woman.
Oh, that sounds sweet.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that particular book?
Well, the inscription says, "Take this with pleasure," which is just so charming. And then there are these two monograms underneath the figures that spell out Marie and Dacca. So it seems like this book might have been a love token, or maybe even an engagement gift.
That's so lovely. It really adds a personal touch to the whole idea of books as gifts.
And the funny thing is, the book itself is all about a gift. The Earl of Toul saving his beloved from being falsely accused. It's like a gift within a gift.
That's amazing. So this exhibition really does showcase all these different layers of meaning that can be packed into a gift. From tokens of love to displays of power to expressions of faith. Were there any examples of more like everyday gifts, though?
Yeah, definitely. The exhibition also looks at the more personal side of gift giving. Like they have letters about gifts of food and clothing exchanged between family members. It shows how these everyday acts of giving were such a big part of people's lives.
Those are the gifts that often mean the most, aren't they? The ones that come from the heart without any big expectations or ulterior motives.
Absolutely. And I think those small acts of giving are just as important today as they were back then. Like, think about the care packages we send to loved ones or the homemade meals we share with neighbors. Even just taking the time to listen to a friend who needs to talk.
You're right. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts are the ones that can't be bought.
Exactly. And that reminds me, what are some of the most memorable gifts you've received?
That's a good question. I think for me, one of the most precious gifts is being able to learn and share knowledge. And honestly, that's what I love so much about this exhibition. It's the chance to dig into history, uncover these fascinating stories, and then share them with others.
I couldn't agree more. I feel the same way. So maybe it's time to bring things back to the present.
Yeah, good idea.
Like, how has the whole idea of gift giving changed in today's world, with all the consumerism and everything?
That's a great question. And one that we're going to explore in our final segment. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Okay, so we're back, and we've been talking all about the history of gift giving. But now I'm curious, how has the meaning of giving changed in our modern world?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. We live in a world where there's just so much stuff everywhere. And sometimes it feels like gift giving has become all about consumerism, especially around the holidays.
You know what I mean? It's like the thought behind the gift gets lost, and it all becomes about how much money you spend in. Right. But even with all that commercialization, I still think the true spirit of giving is still out there.
So how do we navigate that? How do we find those meaningful gifts in a world that's overflowing with stuff?
I think it comes down to a shift in perspective. Instead of focusing on material things, we can think about giving experiences or sharing our time and talents, or even just listening to someone who needs it.
That makes sense. It reminds me of the story about Esther English offering her calligraphy skills to Queen Elizabeth.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to express our care and connection in a way that's meaningful to the person receiving the gift. Sometimes the most valuable gifts are the ones you can't buy.
That's a beautiful thought. And it really brings us back to the heart of this exhibition. It's not about the things themselves, but about the human connections they represent.
I think that's a great way to put it. This exhibition shows us how giving is a fundamental part of what makes us human. It's how we express ourselves, build relationships, and make our mark on the world.
And if anyone's ever in Oxford, I highly recommend checking out The Gift of Giving at the Bodleian Library. It's a truly inspiring exhibition that will stay with you long after you leave.
Yeah, and if you can't get to Oxford, they have a book that goes along with the exhibition. It's full of fascinating stories and beautiful images.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into the world of giving, and we hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as we've enjoyed talking about it. It's a topic that's both timeless and timely, and it reminds us of the power of human connection, generosity, and the lasting impact of gifts.
We'd love to hear your thoughts too. What are some of the most meaningful gifts you've ever given or received? Share your stories with us.
And don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more exciting explorations of history, culture, and ideas. Until next time.
Happy giving, everyone!